Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 109. My name is NBZ, and we're fully into 2018. Gears have been engaged, cars' engines are revving, it's still kind of snowing. It was snowing outside today again, so the year will continue to be cold, but how are you doing, Bally?
I'm very good, NBZ. No snow over here in Brussels.
Unfortunate. It's one of those things that it tends to actually happen closer to February. It seems like that's actually the coldest time of the year, even though there's this weird thing where it's like December should be like when it's coldest and when winter is happening, it feels the most wintry, and it's like, no, that's the planet is like, no, that's not the case. That's not when
apparently in the
happens.
US there's like loads of snow in areas that are really not used to snow, like lots of the southern states and things. And
hey man, global
hopefully
warming,
if you're
thing.
listening, you're safe in the southern states of America and listening to our show.
Yeah, I wish you the best. Yeah, people just being snowed in and not able to get into work and all that stuff. It's bad times. But hey, what does that mean? It means you're stuck inside, able to play some video games. Which is what this podcast is about, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Bally, what are we going to be talking about in today's show?
For our first segment, we will be talking about what we have been playing. Our second segment, as usual, will be emails. And for our third segment, there's been quite a lot of news recently, so we're going to do a bit of a news roundup in our third segment.
Yeah, Nintendo just dropping bombs left, right, and center. Some nuclear, some not so, but there's definitely a lot to discuss. And 2018 is going to be an interesting year for sure. So let's kick things off then with some video games. Bally, you've entered platforming heaven. You've decided to play two games that I hold in incredibly high regard, and it makes me very happy.
You've been pestering me for years to play these games. Both of them actually came out originally in 2010. I think you played VVVVV in 2013.
I don't remember.
Near the start of the 3DS.
There's this few years before the podcast where I was playing a lot of games, but I wasn't like chronicling them in the same way that I do now. So there is a bit of a kind of blurred mess in my mind, but sure, we'll say that.
And then Meat Boy you probably played during that same time as well, didn't you?
Meat Boy was one of the first games I played when I got my PC.
Right.
Built my PC, didn't build it, but I ordered my PC, got it, and downloaded Steam. One of the first things I bought in my first Steam sale for like £1.50 was Super Meat Boy. I was actually saying that on Twitter the other day, is like, I mean, it's cool that all these Switch ports are coming out, but Steam has really ruined me in terms of pricing, because all these games that are old that came out and I bought years ago for like absurdly low prices are now full price on the Switch eShop, and it makes it hard for me to justify like buying them again. So I'm like, I paid a pittance for that back in the day, like 4 years ago.
But now you can do it portably.
Yeah, it's true. There is an added benefit, but
yeah, so the first game I'm going to talk about is VVVVV. That should be 6 Vs if I've missaid it. Yeah, like I said, been meaning to play this quite a long time. I just really wanted to play something a bit short on my Switch.
You also played this without telling me at all, and then you're like, oh, by the way, I played this game and beat it, and you didn't know. I'm like, what the fuck, Valley? You never do that.
Yeah, I checked how long to beat, and I was like, oh, it's like 2.5 hours to beat the whole thing. So I was like, yeah, let's just do that. The first thing that strikes me about this game is how old this game looks. Like, they're going for such a retro PC style. It's beyond. It's the oldest looking game I think I've ever played in terms of like just that style. It's very. Sure. It's not even. Is it even 8-bit?
I don't even know what it is, honestly. It's definitely a different type of aesthetic. It's not necessarily leaning into the Nintendo like old school NES days. It is definitely more a PC kind of visual look it's going for sure. It almost feels like those kind of ASCII text games that you see sometimes in some senses, but it is definitely more colourful like that, and there's more to it than that, I think.
Yeah. So this is a 2D platformer, and actually it has no jump. Instead of jumping, you actually flip gravity, so your little character will just basically zoom from the floor to the ceiling just at the click of a button. And initially, like the whole world is actually a Metroidvania style platforming world. Originally I really didn't like the idea that this was going to be Metroidvania, and I thought, God, I'm going to have an absolute nightmare trying to find... So you have to find 6 characters. You're one of the characters, so I guess you're finding 5 characters, all of which their names begin with the letter V, and they're spread throughout this Metroidvania world. And I thought that I would end up really struggling to find the last character, but the way that the map fills in clearly shows you where you've been and where you've not been, so you can actually work out pretty easily where to go next. So by the end of the game, that aspect really didn't bother me, and it was actually just a really interesting way of designing this world. One of the famous levels in this game, and I say level, it's like a section I should say, is called Vidi Vini Vici. Vini Vidi Vici?
Veni Vidi Vici.
Veni Vidi Vici. I almost got it. And I actually found this within the first 20 minutes of playing, and I kind of knew what it was. I actually thought vaguely that it was something you had to do. It actually is something you don't have to do. It's just for one of the 20 collectibles in the game. And what's the best way of describing this level? You're essentially flipping gravity once, guiding your character, falling upwards through about 6 rooms, avoiding spikes. You're then hitting a disintegrating platform once after you've fallen through 6 rooms, and you have to fall back the other way, all in order to cross over like a really small circle that's just lying in front of your character, and ensuring that you flip all the way up, hit off the ceiling, and flip all the way back down, and fall to the right of this little log that's essentially in your way.
It's funny because you can't jump. It's like this obstacle that for Mario would be a pittance, and yet you have to, the only way you can get it is by flipping gravity, going through this absurd gauntlet, and then flipping gravity again to get back down to the bottom. It's crazy.
And it really is an absurd gauntlet. Like, this might be the toughest thing I've ever done in a video game, maybe. It took me about 45 minutes to beat, and I'm worried that Caroline thought I was going insane, like trying to beat it. And it's kind of one of those muscle memory things where in between rounds I was trying to move my body so little that I'd get the maximum benefit of muscle memory and the feeling of my body sitting in at that exact angle in order to to like it was a weird state of mind to be in, and it's not one I enjoy getting in very often, but sometimes you just got to bang your head up against that brick wall and just do it. And I did it, and it was a great feeling. So yeah, there you go. But the downside of doing this 20 minutes into the game was that the rest of the game felt pretty easy in comparison, which was actually quite nice because I found the rest of the game actually fairly relaxing when really it probably should have been a lot more... It should have felt a lot more challenging. It still was very challenging the rest of the game.
I guess that's kind of the pitfall when you design more of an open structure, because there's no like a set order that you have to go and collect all these characters in. You can kind of go wherever you want. And you were talking to me about the map and how you didn't like it originally. I'm like, well, like I like it a lot because it's filling in squares, and that's one of the reasons I like Metroidvanias is because I just like filling in squares, you know. And I
could just get you some graph paper and some
You
crayons.
don't even know. Like back in the day when we were younger, I used to, those fucking massive art books of like different shapes and shit. I used to color those in for days and days. I was fucking obsessed with that stuff. I used to be really into it. I don't know. There's something to me that appeals about just filling in spaces. And a good mark of any Metroidvania for me is like how satisfying it feels to just fill spaces.
Would it kill you on the inside if I told you that there were large sections of the map I didn't fill in by the end of this game?
Don't even bring that up into my brain. I don't want to hear it. No, it sounds awful.
So yeah, the level design is fantastic. Some of my favorites were this mechanic where it's this string essentially that flips gravity for you just by hitting off it. So you're essentially just rebounding.
Right, it forces you to basically bounce off of it. You can't stand on it. It's not a platform. It's just like it's like you're bouncing between 2 elastic bands almost.
And there's like moving shapes and things you have to dodge and all sorts of things that I thought were actually really enjoyable. Generally, you're just avoiding spikes and enemies a lot of the time. There's some like really kind of light humor jokes in there, like with random words, just enemies that are made up of words and really strange stuff. It's hard to describe, but some of that was quite fun. There's sort of like a I described it as escort mission, but you weren't happy when I described it as this, MBZ. But it's essentially you're guiding one of the characters who will follow you when your gravity is on the same plane as theirs, but when you're on the opposite plane, they don't follow you. So it's all about sort of coaxing them through a maze-like level, essentially
It's just a different type of puzzle solving, really, disguised as an escort mission.
It really stood out versus the other levels. I didn't like it as much as the other levels, but I mean, it's nice to mix up what you're actually doing in this game, so it's not all bad.
There's some auto-scrolling section as well. I like the one that scrolls upward, I think it is.
There's there's auto-scrolling, there's the reflecting strings we've talked about, there's the escort star mission, that it mixes it up, which is really fresh. And
because it is essentially a one-button game. Like, you are moving left and right and pressing one button, and they get a lot of mileage out of that stuff, for sure.
It really is, and it literally is just left and right. There's like zero controls of up and down because that's all controlled by the gravity. There's literally nothing, which is quite unique amongst modern platformers. I don't think there's anything else that quite does it that abruptly. So the big thing that we've not talked about yet, which is hard to talk about on a podcast, but is one of the best parts of this game, is the soundtrack. You've been at me for ages, MBZ, saying, Bally is like the best soundtrack ever. You've never listened to it. You need to play this game. You need to enjoy the soundtrack. And I am a convert. Like, I really enjoyed the soundtrack. And there's some amazing remixes on YouTube of all sorts of things. I highly recommend. What's his name? The
Family
guitar.
Jewels.
Family Jewels does an incredible 7-minute guitar medley of the soundtrack.
I love medleys. Medleys are one of my favorite things to look up on YouTube.
Right.
I remember when I found this girl who did a Panic at the Disco and a Green Day medley, and I lost my mind. She was like an incredible singer, and like she was like on piano, like riffing these medleys through all my favorite songs of those bands. It was so good. So I'm always naturally attracted to like taking all of the good songs and smushing them together into this one thing. That medley is amazing.
The game's only 2.5 hours. It was a joy from start to finish. Maybe I shouldn't have invested 45 minutes in the really tough I can't even say it.
Vini Vidi Vici. It's a famous Latin phrase, Bally. Freaking it's all about Julius Caesar and nonsense.
So maybe I should have, maybe I could have avoided that level, but I just knew it was such a famous level that I really wanted to do it and say that I'd done it. So I can.
And now you can say that you came, you saw, and you conquered.
I've done it.
As the Latin phrase means.
Exactly.
So there you go.
So that was one game. I'd highly recommend it I think it's like $8.99 on the Switch eShop, which is way overpriced for a game that came out in 2010. I can't defend that.
Right, but there is also a lot more extra content on it. As with the 3DS version, I believe all those bonus levels that were made by various developers are available there. Like, you can go through a ton of crazy different stages, and that was when the 3DS was new and there wasn't a lot coming out digitally. I played that game a lot because it had so much extra stuff in there. So yeah, if you want something more out of it, there is more there.
And the other game that I've been playing that I mentioned at the start is Super Meat Boy, which has just come out on the Nintendo Switch.
One might say an indie classic at this point in time.
An indie classic, and we were actually sent a review code for this game.
Yes, we were.
So that was great to receive. I'm just going to put this out there before we move on to anything else about this game. I just do not like the whole idea of like being a bloody chunk of meat.
You were telling me this, and I was like, I don't know. I just never thought about it before. It's like, whatever. I kind of think it's cool that you can paint the walls with yourself. I don't know, whatever.
And I definitely detach myself from it the more I've played it, because it really doesn't matter. The story is zany and pointless and whatever. And
maybe call me a sicko, but I like the weird juicy sounds it makes. It works for me. I like it.
It's kind of, maybe it's growing on me in the idea that if you threw a slab of meat at a wall, it would slide down at the same rate that the physics
It's so good, though, yeah.
So maybe that is kind of cool, but like it just still grosses me out a bit, and it's a bit weird. Anyway, like, style and artwork aside, and the art is actually very good. Like, it works well. I just don't like the idea at all. But the platforming, which is what this game is about, feels incredible. This is platforming in the way that in my head I envisage my ideal 2D platformer to be. It's a menu with levels. You click the level, you do the level and you go back to the menu. Well, you don't actually go back to the menu; it just brings you on to the next level. But my point is that the levels are segmented. It's very clear cut and very pure, just platforming.
And very bite-sized, actually. Is Meat
very
Boy.
bite-sized. And what's unique is that Meat Boy has so much control when you're in the air. So obviously there's like a sprint button, which I think almost all the platformers I play these days have sprint buttons. And in this game specifically, it changes the distance you're jumping tremendously, even when that's like wall jumping or just general jumping in this game in overall. And it feels so... It really feels like it changes the gravity when you're not sprinting. To like you essentially have two different types of jumps. You've got your sprint jump and your regular jump, and there are actually moments where you're not meant to sprint. You're meant to sort of walk up to obstacles and jump over them normally.
Maybe that was why I was having a bit of trouble, because I actually went back to this game now that you're playing it to like refresh myself and to get back into on PC, and it felt so different from how I remember. And maybe it's because I'm constantly holding down the sprint button that I feel like I'm a little bit out of control of sorts at certain times, because I don't think you're super meant to do that. But I also remember when I played it that I was holding down the sprint button most of the time, so I don't know, it's a little weird because he feels a little bit less controllable than I have in my mind's eye.
I mean, I do think all the levels are designed where you can beat the whole level while holding the sprint button, because like that's how you receive like the A+ grade for beating each level.
And like on that point, because I went back and was trying to A+ a bunch of levels, because you have like Dark World versions of every level, which are much harder versions, and you can only get them if you do it in a fast time. And I was really noticing how the level design was built for like very quick, like precise wall jumps that would lead you down this certain path to get you directly there as soon as possible. So the level design is very much thought of as having two ways to do it. Like you have a shorter or a much faster way to do it and a much kind of more meandering way to do it.
But I mean, the two quirky things I really like about this game are, one, and this is something VVVVV actually also does, is the instant restart. It makes such a big difference.
Have you played a platformer in this style before where you have an instant restart? Because it feels like you're just doing two of these back to back where you haven't.
Don't think so. Yeah, these are probably the first two, and it's funny that I play them back to back. It makes such a big difference because, like, I'll put on a podcast and play this game, and the first thing I do when I die is I want to try that jump again. Like, I need to try that moment again, and it's to do with the muscle memory as well. Like, you want to play it again while your brain is in the setup in order to play that level. Like, if you come back to it, some of the tougher levels can be incredibly tough. And even like what you've said, Mizo, trying it out again after all these years, like, it feels a bit different.
Yeah, I jumped back into like the end of the game and I was like, nope, I can't. I need to like refresh myself. So that's why I went back and played some older levels to like refresh myself on how it feels and everything. Because it's very much like Bit Trip Runner 2, because
that's a game that I would argue definitely has the instant restart.
I don't know how instant they are, but it's definitely fast.
It's like it's instant with the next beat. I feel like it's like on a timer where the music doesn't change on Bit Trip Run, as in the beat won't change, but you will only be able to come in on the next beat. So it's sort of not quite instant. You're right, but it feels a lot like that in many ways. I do think that I probably won't do all the extra levels. I'm in the 5th world out of, I believe, 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think there are 6 main ones. The 7th one is a bonus one, which I haven't got through myself.
Right, so I'll probably just do the 6 main ones. They're like, I've reached some hidden sort of retro style areas.
Yeah. They're like wormholes that you go into, and they're like really difficult.
Yeah, they're weird, and sometimes they've really annoyed me because I've gone into them by accident when I've been quite far through another level. And I've been I can't be bothered with this. So like, I don't really want to do those extra levels necessarily. And as you said, there's sort of like a Bandage Girl world or Dark World.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got the energy for all that, but I'd like to beat the main game.
I didn't do that, you know. Like, I'm only going back to it now because I'm like, I want to play some more Meat Boy. And the thing I like about leaving that stuff open is I always know I'll have more Meat Boy to play at some point in my life. I kind of leave it there because I want some new stuff eventually, and I don't know that this new Meat Boy game is going to give me the same stuff that I got from the first one. I don't know if a second one, proper sequel, will ever be made. So it's kind of like one of my precious like favorite platformers. I don't want to complete things. I want to keep coming back to it years and years down the line. Weirdly, in that way.
The other point I said there was 2 points I liked about this game. The first point I already said with the instant restarts. The other point was the replays of all your attempts through the levels. So you might attempt a level 50 times, and then when you finally complete it, you'll see all 50 of your attempts running at the same time in the replay, and it's great. It looks so cool, like just seeing all these. I love aspects like that in video games. Like I love in Pikmin 3 when you can rewatch the day and look at how your Pikmin all ran throughout the day and it's sped up. Or when we're playing like Nintendo Land and you're doing the Mario Chase minigame, and at the end of the game you actually watch the route that everyone took. And like, I love aspects like that.
The top-down view of it.
Right, the top-down view. So I just think little replays like that are sped up in games, like there's something about that where it's sort of essentially it's like just collecting data and then showing you the data in a different way. I just find it very satisfying. I don't know if
it's really cool. Like, and the way that it happens in Meat Boy is like there's this enormous cluster at the start, and then by the end it's like these few or these couple that...
there's like 4 of them, and there you go. Oh, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the one made it. It's like, well done. And then so I'm having a great time with it. I don't know which I prefer out of the two of these games at the moment, and
they're really good.
I'll finish up Meat Boy for next time, and maybe have a decision to make on which I prefer then. But
at the end of the year, you're gonna have to, I guess, make a decision.
Right, exactly. So these are both in my games of the year. Didn't come out this year, probably. So we'll see. MBZ.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been, as you've been playing 2 hardcore 2D platformers, I've been trying to play, and I stress the word trying to play, 2 first-person shooters. I said last time I was going to play the original Half-Life, which was all a road laid with great intentions. Turns out, guys, it's an old PC game and it doesn't have very good FOV settings, or it doesn't have anything. Well, I guess apparently I can go into the source engine and change stuff, like from the doing within the menu and finding some like hacky way of changing things so that my settings are better. I'll look into a way to do that. Anyway, my point is, it makes me feel motion sick, like a lot of first-person games. And someone on Twitter actually brought it up that I think it's because Gordon Freeman, the main character, is also very slidey. Like, he slips around a lot. He's not a very stable character, so every time you move and you stop, he kind of slides a little bit, which contributes to that feeling of unease and motion sickness that I get sometimes in games. And it's a real bummer, because I was, for the most part, like, kind of enjoying going through this game. There's a lot of interesting things that happen that you can see, like, the DNA for like games to come and things that it was doing that were unique at the time, like walking past NPCs as they kind of talk and they deliver dialogue to you without you having to enter a cutscene, like naturalistic in-game storytelling as opposed to cutscene gameplay. And so, like, you're going down at this science facility and there are scientists everywhere, and you'll hear, the audio is balanced so that you can hear it like surround sound. Like, if you're closer to them or further away from them, it'll change as you move towards and away. And every time Gordon moves, the scientists will move their head, so they'll like basically be looking at the player as they in real time go around them. So it definitely, you can see like these ideas that at the time were clearly mind-boggling, that led to like later games and how they work.
What year was this game originally?
I don't know. I think like late 90s, early 2000s, something along those lines. But yeah, it's the Half-Life series is generally credited as being like this kind of footprint of narrative first-person game that kind of laid the path for a lot of things to come. And it's so far, in terms of like combat mechanics and stuff, it's not been mind-blowing. It's I've always heard about head crabs, which are these tiny little enemies that they jump up. They're called head crabs because they try and attach themselves to your head. They're like what do you call them, things from Alien. I can't remember what those are called.
Or Metroids.
Or Metroids, right? I guess in any media, this kind of alien-type species is always pervasive, like the idea of the head, and I'm sure there are some very interesting essays written about the body, and kind of bringing me back to my fucking...
Is it quite horror-ish then? I didn't think that was your thing.
A little bit, yeah, it's a little bit.
Or is it just too old to be quite intimidating.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing. Because I actually, when I was at university, I watched The Shining for the first time, which a lot of people like, oh, it's such a scary film. I'm like, when I watched it, I was afraid because I didn't want to really, but it was okay. It wasn't.
I feel so anxious watching something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I was okay. A lot of it is tension, but a lot of it is also it's an old movie, so there's an artifice to it that I can kind of see through. And it's similar with Half-Life, where it's like there is actually some really good like music and tension and sound design stuff going on that gives that horror vibe to some degree, but also like you can see the polygons on this alien. You know, it's really not that frightening. And it is pretty difficult, more challenging. Like I put it on easy and I actually died a couple times still. Maybe it's just like old first-person shooters were just more like that, but like your main weapon you start off is a pipe, so you're just like smacking these aliens with a pipe, and that's it feels a little bit mashy to some degree. Like the combat doesn't feel great. They will like you can see the animation of them stretching their arms out to slash at you, so you just move away, let them slash, move in, slam them on the head with a pipe a few times, move away, slam them on the head. You know, it's kind of this repeated mechanism you go through again and again, and it was getting interesting, but also I was feeling sick and I was like, I don't know if I have the bandwidth to go through this 12-hour game, which apparently is how long it is.
That's quite long actually, I guess.
Yeah, I do want to go back to it. I do want to mess around with the FOV setting, see if that changes anything, see if I can find some way to make
like 1 hour a week or something for the next 12 weeks and you'll get there.
And honestly, like Valve games maybe have this problem with me because Portal 2 was a game that I had to play in 1 hour increments, otherwise I'd feel motion sick. But Portal 2 is such a fucking good game that I really had to push myself through. Like
it's a very short game as well, yeah.
Well, I don't know. The original Portal is very short. Portal 2 is longer. It's more like a 7-8 hour game. Okay. But it definitely was one of those things where I couldn't do it all in one stretch. It would have it just wrestled with my motion sickness too much, which is unfortunate. But again, like the thing that I think I've gotten out of it already, which I think is maybe the most important, is seeing why this game is so revered and seeing why people hold it up, and what it did for the medium back then. And it's good to get that context at the very least. Even if I never finish it, I'm glad I have the context. So the other first-person shooter that I have been playing is a game that a lot of people probably have never heard of. It's a game that came out quite a few years ago, and it's kind of a lower-budget title that wasn't not this big AAA thing, but it was developed by Techland, who made Dying Light a couple of years back, got good reviews. That kind of open-world zombie survival game that people really enjoyed, and it's published by Ubisoft. It's called Call of Juarez Gunslinger. I think Call of Juarez is like a series or a sub-series that Ubisoft has been in control of. And this is a Western first-person shooter. And it has a lot of really interesting, unique things about it. So the aesthetic is very comic book, and it's told... the framework of it is this cowboy walks into this bar, and he's telling a group of strangers a story about all the exploits he's done in his life and all the famous people from the Old West that he's had encounters with. And I think it's very fictionalized in terms of the timeline, because he's bringing up all these people like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Billy the Kid, I guess. They all have kids in their names, these cowboys. And I don't know. So you'll recognize these names. It's one of those weird things about Western and pop culture is that everyone for some reason knows the names of all these cowboys, and I don't know how that permeates culture, but for whatever reason I knew the name of all these famous cowboys and Western figures.
I don't think I could name a cowboy, to be honest.
You've never heard of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or Billy the Kid or any of this stuff before? Really? Because it's one of those things that, I don't know, I've just picked up generally from pop culture.
Right.
But I don't know that they all existed at the same period of time, and yet there's this one character who is basically going and killing them all, essentially, as you go through the Old West. And so the really interesting part of this game, and why I was so curious about it back in the day, because I watched, I think it was Total Biscuit who did a video when he was, looking at all these games on Steam and stuff, and I was watching a lot of his stuff back then. In terms of narrative, the story being told is him at the bar, and you hear people interjecting and cutting in. And so what happens is sometimes he will say something that someone will call him out on and say, hey, that's not how I heard it happened. and he'll be like, oh, well, actually, this happened. So an easy example is he was like, I was being attacked by the Apaches, and they're up on the hill and all this. And the guy's like, hey, I don't think that happened. He's like, well, no, really, it was just some of this dude's henchmen. It wasn't actually Apaches. And so it rewinds the scene, and all of a sudden, instead of Apaches you're fighting up on the hill, you're fighting a bunch of different cowboy guys instead. So it reworks the gameplay depending on what happens in the narrative that is being told. And there's some really cool moments. Like there's one moment where you're running down this mine shaft and it's really epic, and you're like gunning people down, and you jump out the other side, and it goes into slow-mo as you just like pull off headshots on like these 6 dudes in a row, and like you fall to the ground because an explosion happens behind you. It actually starts off with a moment where you dodge a bullet, and the bullet hits a barrel, and it kind of explodes you out the other side, and it's like this grand moment, and you're like, wow, how did he survive that? And he's like, that was actually bullshit. I just wanted to tell that as if it was a more epic narrative. And then you like rewind all the way back to the beginning of the mine shaft, and he goes the other direction instead. So that's really clever. I think that's just such a cool thing that I've not seen a lot of in games before. It's kind of the key thing that attracted me to playing it. But it's also pretty fun mechanically. Like you can see it's more of a budget title because the environments aren't super different from one another, and it's pretty short. It's like 5 hours long, and most of the time you're just shooting dudes. Like it's a first-person shooter. There's not a lot of other mechanics to it. But the guns feel good. Like, I like old-timey guns. I like revolvers, and I like kind of old-timey shotguns. Like, there's a real good sound and feel, and even, like, when you're loading the guns up, like, putting the cartridges in is a nice kind of impact and sound to it. So, you know, coming off something like Wolfenstein 2, where it's much more modern guns, I mean, relatively speaking, it's a nice change from that, and it felt like I had to be a bit more careful about conserving ammo and that sort of thing. It was nice to be thrown into a different style of shooting, and there are a couple of interesting things I mentioned before. How that mine moment was triggered by dodging a bullet. There's a great mechanic in this game, which is amazing for someone like me who isn't amazing at first-person shooters, is just when you're on death's door and you're about to be hit for your final blow and be taken down, it goes into slow motion and a bullet starts coming at you. And depending on where the bullet is on the screen, you can either dodge left or right. And if you get it wrong, you'll get hit by the bullet. But if you get it right, you like slow-mo dodge out the way of the bullet, and it gives you like another chance at life, essentially. Like you can hide again and be able to survive. Because the health system is just regenerating. So if you hide for a long time, you'll just heal up naturally. So it gives you the opportunity, if I fuck up, which I did a lot. Like a lot of the time, I was like slow motion dodging out the way of these bullets, and I was able to get through the scenario. That was very helpful. I think that's just such a smart thing for players who are less experienced. And it's also really fucking cool. Dodging out the way of bullets is always going to be cool in any medium, no matter what. I'm just of the opinion that that's a great thing. And then the other unique thing it does is its version of boss fights are basically these face-off duels, where it is like an old west like face-off where you're like holding to the gun and you have to, it's like the two people just standing in the middle of a road, and they're seeing whoever pulls the gun first and gets the shot off and kills the other guy. But it's interesting mechanically because you have to manage the two parts of your two hands. One hand with the mouse, which is like having this circle that slowly like homes in on them. And it's a little bit hard to move, which makes sense because you're trying to like get this focus on. It's a little bit laggy, and so it's difficult to like keep a keen focus on them. And they're like maybe pacing back and forward a little bit, so you have to follow them with your mouse. And then your other hand is like moving itself closer to your gun holster. And there's these two percentages. One is focus and one is speed. And you want to basically be like, it's like tapping your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time, like trying to have these two things line up perfectly so you have a good amount of speed and a good amount of focus, so that when the person goes to pull for their gun, like you click and then you're able to get off the shot before they can. And it's really interesting. I think it can get frustrating, but there's also an easy way out of it. if you don't want to get like the maximum points or whatever, because you can, there's an XP system where you can, level up a little bit and stuff throughout the game. It's not like super consequential. But if you're not worried about those points, you can dishonorably kill your opponent, which means before they even touch their gun and pull it out, you can just pull yours and kill them. But it has to get to a point where you hear your own heartbeat. Like it gets, once you're set up properly and you have enough high percentage, you'll start hearing a heartbeat. And as soon as you hear that, you can basically be an asshole and kill them before you're supposed to, and it will say dishonorably killed at the end. It's really cool. It's such a it's a game I've been meaning to play for so long, and I think I actually got it through a Humble Bundle, and I'm really glad I did because it's so unique and weird. It's called Call of Juarez Gunslinger. I know, it's not very easy to remember name. It's not super catchy, but I recommend it. It's a good 5 hours of just fun Western cowboy shooting. There's something about that that is appealing to me, and I enjoyed it a lot. So there you go. All right. I've also been playing a ton of Final Fantasy VI, which you have as well, and we will get to that because we're going to be discussing it in our Backlog Club. But for now, I think that is going to wrap us up for our first segment. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after the break with your emails.
Hello everyone and welcome back to this show. It is time for the second segment, and that means it's time for your emails. We need some more emails, as I always say, of course, because our email address is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Send us in your questions, and while you're at it, tell us where you're from, because it's good to know. It's good to know where all the TNL listeners are from around the world.
I can guarantee Bali will stalk you, so you.
I'm not going to stalk anyone. It's just fun to know. It's fun to know.
But yeah, it's a new year. Let's hear from some new people. That'd be great. Send us an email.
So our first email is from Holden M, who's from the internet. Hello TNL, is the Zelda fan cycle happening to Mario Odyssey right now? All the reviews were very positive, but a lot of the Nintendo podcasts I've been perusing are all really front-loading their complaints. Oddly enough, the game Odyssey is negatively being juxtaposed with 3D World, a game I thoroughly enjoyed, but many others lambasted as being safe. I'm fine with people criticizing something they love as long as it's insightful and interesting, but in my opinion, if you're criticizing something very good, your overall inflection should be positive. Overall, I'm a little bothered by the waffling I'm perceiving at the moment. Granted, I'm aware that there exist different proponents and fan bases, and when you grease one wheel, the others start to squeak. On a tangent to my original question, what are your thoughts on the usage of comparative analysis in the realm of critique? Thanks, Holden.
Very interesting question. I think maybe begin at the end here, because when it comes to Mario and Zelda and any Nintendo franchise, comparative analysis is just going to happen no matter what. It's kind of an inevitability, and it's a problem because it's easy, right? Like, it's one of those things that people fall into because instead of trying to look at it on its own for its own merits, it has to be compared because that's what people find the thing that they can attach to. Like, comparing things is natural, and trying to critique without comparison is, I think, much harder generally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that
so people just kind of claw for that as they go.
That idea really falls into Game of the Year discussions when you're constantly, and we've just had loads of Game of the Year discussions across all the podcasts, I want to say. I've listened to loads, and what always happens is comparative discussions, and rather than a lot of people saying, oh, this game is better than this game because this aspect is better than that aspect in this game, a lot of people end up saying, you know, that there are these weaknesses in this game that you wouldn't otherwise talk about because most of the games of the year are some of the best reviewed games of the year, obviously. So
right.
But a lot of flaws in some of those games that weren't really raised frequently throughout the year because people were only talking about the positives always get brought up when you're making the comparison with other games, and then you're focusing a lot more on the flaws when ultimately like you're positive on both games but you're highlighting a flaw just to put one game above another. And I came away from Giant Bomb's Game of the Discussion thinking, wow, some people felt really salty towards a lot of really great games in that top 10, and it felt a bit weird when you know that the majority of all of those commentators were very positive on all those games, just not as positive as other games perhaps.
Right, it's a weird thing because when you get down to the best things, there has to be a way to pull them apart and make them, like, make your favorite be in front, and so you have to go in with a massive, like, cleaving knife and just try to eviscerate the competition, essentially.
Right.
And it's... I understand like why people do it and why it's fun. I find it very entertaining. I think it's
definitely.
great.
And we're guilty of it too with our top 50 games of all time and our games of the year. We definitely go full hog into it.
Like, I didn't like shitting all over Wind Waker to try and get it to be below Galaxy 2, but I had to do it. Like, it felt like my duty. And, like, ultimately, I love those games. Like, I think they're both amazing games, and they should have been there. But when it comes down to, like, creating a stupid, arbitrary list, you know, the opinions are going to flow. And so it is interesting that, like, I was watching Easy Allies Game of the Year stuff, and when it got down to the end, like, the whole time they're like, you know, when they talk about each of their nominees, like in the top 10, they just talk about all the positives, what they love, and then it came down to the final two games, and the entire, like, hour-long conversation was just the problems with both of these games. Right. And so, yeah, it does end up happening that way. But I feel like he's maybe talking more about within the franchise themselves, right? Like having Mario Odyssey directly compared to 3D World, for example. How do you feel about that? How do you feel that people are dealing with Odyssey right now? I know that you recently watched Joseph Anderson's critique of Mario Odyssey. Like there are detractors around of these games. How do you feel about those complaints and how the game is being perceived now? And is this just an inevitability on the internet these days? Is just everything's going to be critiqued because there's so many voices?
A game like Odyssey is more unique than most, I would want to say, in that you can enjoy that game on a number of levels. And the two most obvious levels I think you enjoy that game are, we've said before, the original 12-hour, 10-hour run-through of the main game where you're experiencing these new captures every, 20 minutes, half an hour, and it's constantly feeling fresh, versus the, I'm going to go and get it in excess of 500, 600 moons, and those are almost two very different games in a sense. And
absolutely. As
a reviewer, that job of saying, is this a good game, and comparing it to something like 3D World, where the idea of getting all the green stars in 3D World and completing every level, I feel like a higher percentage of people who bought 3D World will go after that, perhaps compared to a game like Odyssey, just because it's quicker and easier to do than going after the 999 moons in Odyssey. And that's not to say that 3D World is better or worse, or Odyssey is better or worse. It's just you're comparing such different things that, as from a review perspective, it's so difficult to say what's good and what's bad and what's more enjoyable, when 99% of the reviewers anyway are going to review Odyssey on its ability in that first 12 hours, which I think, if you want 12 hours of a video game from 2017, I don't think there's much that ever beats Odyssey across lots of games. So like it's very difficult to analyze that versus the longer aspect of Odyssey, which you can argue, like Joseph Anderson does repeatedly, there are some very repetitive elements of going for the 999 moons that perhaps you could argue are a flaw, but it's very difficult to isolate that in and of itself because most people aren't going to experience the game in that way. So should that really be a fault of the game? I'm not answering massively with a black and white answer, to be honest.
It's kind
just
of
giving
hard
shades
to.
of grey. Sure, yeah, sure. So I'm a bit on the fence of how to justify how you review comparatively a game like Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, and I think that I felt both ways playing Mario Odyssey. I was enraptured and having such an incredible like thrill ride through the main crux of that game. And then I also had like the annoyance and frustration of trying to 100% the Wooded Kingdom and going insane because I couldn't find the last purple coin and having to write a map and cross things off and just literally being a crazy person.
We don't have that Bowser amiibo is the problem.
Exactly. Fucking, I can't believe that they didn't let you. That's the worst thing about that game is there's no way to like pay money to find where the purple coins are. It's horrible. But I felt like after doing that on the Wooded Kingdom, I'm like, I need to break from this game. Like I put it down for a few days because I'm like, otherwise I'm gonna.
And that's only like the fourth or fifth kingdom, I think, and out of the maybe 15 in the game.
Exactly, and I was like, I need a break. I can't, because it just wasn't giving me the same thing that I was getting out of the game originally. And I think that's the difference between 3D World is like, ultimately going for those green stars, the game is still kind of the same. Like the things you're doing are like a little bit off the beaten path, but when you're going through Mario Odyssey the first time, you're not finding every little nook and cranny and every little secret. It feels much more fluid because of that, and so when you're going back to it, it's a much different experience, and you have to gear your brain differently for it. And I don't know there's another Mario game that is quite the same in that sense.
Yeah, and I think that actually as a comparison, 3D World and Mario Odyssey are probably the two most different 3D Mario games out there. They're so different. And I think that as long as reviewers and critics are making clear how different these games are and not just bunching them under the one umbrella of they're both 3D Mario games, this one's better than this one, I think that you may be onto something.
Yeah, I mean, he brings up the Zelda fan cycle, which is the theory that every time a new Zelda game comes out, it is torn down and they hold up the last one as like, this was the real Zelda game. And I don't know if that's like happened that much with Breath of the Wild, because a lot of people are negative about Skyward Sword, which I am one of the few defenders of Skyward Sword who thinks it is a fantastic game. But there does seem to maybe be that sense happening with some people with 3D World, because it is a more linear kind of constructed Mario game as opposed to the like openness of Odyssey. And there are fans of both, and I enjoy both, but I am one of the weird thing with me is like Galaxy is the perfect sweet spot because it is the perfect mix of Mario's tool set and freedom and movement of the open games, but also the linearity and like clear-cut level design of the 2D games to some degree, but just with more interesting perspective. So I don't know. To be honest, I haven't seen a huge amount of people criticizing Odyssey in that way. Maybe I'm not listening to the right people, but
yeah, I agree. Maybe I'm listening to the wrong people, but I feel like there's, with Breath of the Wild more so than Odyssey, but there's a lot of people saying this is the best Zelda game of all time and nothing else matters from this point forth. And likewise with Odyssey, I think there's still a number of people saying this is the best Mario game of all time, but there's still an awful lot of people out there who absolutely love Mario 64 and always will, and that will always be the number one.
Yeah, I also think there's like a lot of reductive arguments out there, like, oh, there are all these lazy moons that are just sitting out there for you to get. I don't enjoy that. I'm like, how? Like, it really boggles my mind to be like, how do you even have the thought process of this is a lazy moon to get? Because it literally takes you less than a second to look at it, get it, and move on. Like, how that thought process even becomes a critique in your mind is weird.
Like, oh, I wish that moon was hidden under a rock somewhere else. It's a bit, come on.
Yeah.
Some moons will, some moons won't. And just...
Yeah, it gets a little bit weird when it comes down to that, and the reductive arguments, which are always going to happen because eventually you need to dig deep. But I don't know, just as a package, like the look and feel and sound and everything of Mario Odyssey is just, it's. I think Ben Pack said in the Giant Bomb Game of the Year discussions, it is one of the most polished video games he's ever seen, and I think I agree with that sentiment. Like, it is just a sheen all over Mario Odyssey. Maybe too much so, maybe to a degree of sterility for some people.
It's so clean and crisp, and he handles so well in his moveset, and And while like the kingdoms, like while there's some aspects of Galaxy that I just think are so spectacular and amazing to look at, it's ultimately that feel that you have with Mario and Odyssey that's so precise, and like that's where I'm kind of siding, is that like I think Odyssey handles so much better, but there's some worlds and ideas from Galaxy I maybe prefer overall. That's how I'm sort of feeling it. It's conflicted, and I'm falling into the trap of just like comparing these two great games.
Yeah,
and,
exactly. Yeah,
and it's really difficult. But maybe taking the best aspects from lots of great games versus let's try and bring down the best games of the year are two different things, and you can maybe try and do the former more than the latter, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our next email is from our good friend of the show, Toby, who's from London in the UK. Hi, MBZ and Bally. Nintendo have had an incredible 2017. They reminded me why I liked video games so much. That feeling of exploration and wonder in Breath of the Wild, and just sheer joy in Mario Odyssey. But those incredible games take a long time to get right, and I don't see anything very exciting coming in 2018. Are we due a few years of safe Nintendo duds now? Where do Nintendo go next? Love the podcast.
Well, thanks Toby for writing in. It has been a bit of all of your presents in one year, and then is the tree empty the next one kind of situation. It's like it's a tough place, because Nintendo, in creating 2017 for themselves, have now put themselves in a tough position where ultimately the two franchises that they do the best job of building hype with, well, I guess Smash Brothers technically, but like their two kind of big dogs are now out of the race essentially, and those games, you know, as was mentioned, take time. Like it's gonna be another 4 years before we see the next Zelda, at least, in terms of like the true sequel to Breath of the Wild. Mario Odyssey maybe will have a sequel sooner, because I think that Tokyo team works much faster, but there are some gaps that are starting to appear. Like we had the mini direct, and it showed us that there's stuff up until May to some degree. It is ports and stuff, but there is stuff. It's just not. It's not what we necessarily want or what we need. Do you think Nintendo are going to have a tough time in the next couple of years? Because there are things that they have to hit. There are bullet points, but I don't know how radical or how different and interesting those bullet points are going to be, because they really set the bar high already. By reinventing Zelda and then doing a Mario game that's not necessarily reinvented, but is just exceptional in a lot of ways. Yeah,
I can kind of see the idea that 2018 and 2019 are just simply not going to be as hot as 2017. And I mean, if I could have had it any way, I probably would have had it like that, because surely the Switch having the Switch do that much, having that much more impact at launch could be better down the line, and then that library looks thick and powerful later down the line, not necessarily just top-ended, which could be good. I think that it's difficult to expect a game of maybe a game of the scope of Odyssey or Breath of the Wild, maybe one per year here out, maybe one in 2018, whether that's Metroid or maybe something else. Who knows what it's going to be in 2018, but I do feel like they do have the capability to pull off something like that, perhaps on an annual basis, at least for these first few years of the Switch life cycle. I know that we didn't get that near the end of the Wii U life cycle, and that's a very different comparison perhaps to make. But I just don't see... 2017 was the best year like Nintendo's had since I've been into Nintendo, and I don't see them repeating that anytime in the future, to be honest. I don't know how they could make that happen.
It depends also on like what kind of games you want and what you are excited about coming out of Nintendo. I've never been a Metroid Prime person. I'm interested in Prime 4. I will play it most likely, but it's not giving me that like those tingles and those like crazy hype and excitement that Breath of the Wild was doing. Like there's something special about Zelda that builds my excitement like nothing else. And I'm excited about Smash Brothers, but also I feel like from the business perspective and from us looking at the industry and knowing how Nintendo works, it seems like it's going to be more of a port than anything brand new. And so I am excited because there are lots of games that I will enjoy a lot, but it's not going to be the same like build for me as it was before, because there was anticipation to those previous games that like I want to know what Fire Emblem on Switch is like. I know it's going to be amazing and I'm going to enjoy it most likely, but I don't have. There's not the feverish kind of anticipation.
And it almost took the Wii U being in the wilderness for like a couple of years in order to produce a year like 2017. It's not like if Nintendo was producing great games right up until the end of the Wii U's life cycle that 2017 could have even been a possibility. It just simply couldn't have. And like Nintendo had a very weak 2015 and 2016 at the end of the Wii U's life cycle, and I definitely don't think 2018 and 2019 will be anything like as weak as that. And I think we'll still get big, strong games. There's so many big titles that we already know about, at least we don't know the details of, like Pokemon, like Fire Emblem, like Metroid Prime 4. So like if these games do pull it off and do innovative and new things, but not potentially to the degree of Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, I think they will still do absolute gangbusters with the Switch. And games like Pokemon and Animal Crossing and Smash Brothers and perhaps an original Mario Kart, like there's absolute huge business opportunities in terms of Switch sales and huge fan bases that haven't got a game on Switch yet that I think are still to come, especially in 2018 and 19.
So the specific question that Toby asked is like, are we due a few years of safe Nintendo duds? I wouldn't say that we're due any duds, because I think Nintendo tends to, in their like big budget AAA stuff, not produce those. You have things like the Mario Tennis on Wii U and fucking Animal Crossing board game, which were.
Would you define a port as a dud?
No, not necessarily. Like, I think a port is just a lineup filler. I would define a dud as a critical and commercial failure, which I just generally don't think Nintendo have in their like big lineup most of the time. The Wii U was unique in like a lot of scenarios, because Star Fox Zero, I would say, is a dud.
That was sort of the last dud, I guess. Yeah.
Like the major one. I think that we're going to get a lot of safe games, for sure. I don't think Game Freak are talented enough to make Pokemon more radical. I really don't. I don't think the Animal Crossing team wants to stray from the safety of that franchise either. I think that we're going to get games in those franchises that are not duds. They'll be well made, they'll be excellent games, but they will be safe. I think that Nintendo likes to keep certain franchises safe, and I wonder if Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey have maybe changed their mind, because they are having new creators coming up. They are having more interesting developers being put to the forefront who have not worked on every Zelda game or every Mario game or every Metroid in the past. And that potentially means that they can change and be radical. But when I look at a franchise like Pokemon and Animal Crossing, it feels far more entrenched than something like Mario and Zelda.
Yeah, and I think Nintendo are feeling that radicalism through something like Nintendo Labo, which we're gonna like talk about next segment. But like there's something about them right now that is very confident and very keen to inspire and keen to do different stuff and innovative stuff. And
not afraid to be weird, quite frankly.
Right, and we've not really had that. We've not had the details of Pokemon confirmed. We've not had Animal Crossing confirmed yet. And while those might be very, very safe, and I agree, I wouldn't be surprised if they are very safe. You're right. The success of games like Breath of the Wild and Odyssey could potentially boost the idea that those games can be more radically changed and mix up the formula a bit, because they are very not stale. That's an unfair word, I think, but they've been very similar formulas for a very long time.
They're incremental games, like if you look at the first Pokemon and compare it to Sun and Moon, there's vast changes, but over that 2 decades? 1 decade? I don't know how old is Pokemon now. I guess 2 decades, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's 2017. Over those 2 decades, it has been a crawl to get there, but like you compare them, you're like, oh wow, there is a big difference here. Yeah. Animal Crossing less so, honestly. But I don't think Nintendo, in terms of like Pokemon, are gonna have too much control. Like Game Freak and the Pokemon Company, they're kind of an entity to their own. Like I really don't think there's anything Nintendo can really do about them and what they decide on. But Animal Crossing potentially could be more radical and different.
Crazy Pokemon spin-offs like the Detective Pikachu.
Right, oh my god, the trailer for Detective Pikachu came up, I'm like, this is weird in a way that I like, and in a way that I want Pokemon games to actually, like, you look at the production values on Detective Pikachu, and like, it looks fucking miles better than the Game Freak produced Pokemon game on 3DS. I'm like, holy shit, this game looks so much better. It's crazy.
Like, Pokemon creates a fantastic world that, and ideas that you just feel that the mainline games don't always get to the bottom of some of the cool stuff that could take place in that universe. And
yeah, they don't at all.
A side project like Detective Pikachu is pretty exciting.
Yeah, totally. I hope they do more weird things like that. But
we like weird Nintendo, especially when they're doing well. I think that's all we've got time for in terms of your emails this week. But as I said at the top of the segment, please send in more emails. We always need more. Our email address is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Catch us in the third segment, where we will have a news roundup, and there's an awful lot to talk about, so don't go anywhere.
Alright folks, welcome back to the third and final part of today's show, in which a bunch of Nintendo news happened. Some of it just out of nowhere, most of it, actually all of it out of nowhere, I guess, with like little to no warning in both cases. But there were two major things that has happened in the past couple of weeks that are definitely worthy of talking about. The first being a Nintendo Direct Mini that was dropped out of nowhere, despite the fact the internet was going crazy about it beforehand. And the second being Nintendo's new Labo initiative. So we're going to talk about both of these, and we're going to kick it off with the Direct Mini. Bally, there was some fervor going on before this Direct Mini even happened.
It was insane. It was insane because normally we're given the 2-day warning, and often directs are on a Thursday. So on Tuesday, it was like everyone just checking that Nintendo of America Twitter account, and nothing was coming. And people were freaking out. Wednesday passed, nothing came. People were freaking out, and then there were a number of rumors by the Thursday saying, oh, actually, they're going to stealth drop it, and it's not actually going to be a full direct, it's just going to be a short one. So then I think we're given, what was it? No, it wasn't having any warning. It just came at, for me, I think it was at about 6 p.m. my time, and it just dropped a good 15 minutes of announcements out of nowhere.
Yeah. So the thing I'll say is that Nintendo were stirring the pot somewhat. They had two images, one from the official Nintendo account, which was just Chibi Robo on fire, and then there was like a me in a hot dog costume that Nintendo NYC tweeted out. So a lot of Nintendo trying to get out there.
And there was the Talkatoo from Mario Odyssey saying something like, come and find me.
Like, I have a secret.
I have a secret.
Don't know where it
and
is.
Everyone's like, what does this mean?
And they retweeted that tweet like when people were going crazy. The Reset Era thread was at like 600 fucking pages. It was just bedlam. It was absolute ridiculous insanity for honestly kind of a sober direct. It wasn't like anything crazy. A lot of ports going on.
Right.
But some interesting stuff too, and I think it's definitely worthwhile to discuss as interesting announcements here. But it's weird because this does fall in line with what Nintendo has done before with mini directs, which is just upload them to YouTube one day randomly, and that's what's happened. I think the problem is that everyone hyped themselves up. Like, this is our fault. This isn't Nintendo's fault. It's the internet's fault for going crazy.
Way more people than they maybe anticipated own a Switch currently, and they are all eager for some games in 2018 after an amazing 2017, and we're at the
Right.
start of the year. The hype train is just insane, and we were just saying, like, compared to the Wii U days, while there were still hype trains for stuff like E3 and direct announcements, it didn't feel anything like as powerful online. I think that's just simply because not many people owned a Wii U.
Exactly. Like, there is just a critical mass of Switch fans out there that want more, so it makes sense that people are just breaking and going crazy. So, in any case, the Direct happened. Let's go through some of the announcements. It kicked off with The World Ends With You Remixed for Nintendo Switch. The World Ends With You, Square Enix very weird DS RPG that came out around 2008. It's about a decade old at this point. I remember listening to, when I first started listening to podcasts, RFN's retroactive they were doing at the time was The World Ends With You. And it's a game I've always been somewhat curious about because it used the touchscreen and the top screen in terms of a battling at the same time. And I wondered how they would transport that, but they already put it on iOS and made it adaptable somewhat. So I guess the Switch version is kind of based on that iOS one and some changes added. But really crazy because this is like a cult classic. It's one of those games where if the people who have played this game count it among like their favorite games ever. So yeah, curious. I don't know if you have any interest in this whatsoever, Bally, but it's a stylish game.
I do vaguely remember those RFN episodes from yonks back when it was sort of around the time when you were like, oh, Bally, I've gotten into this podcast. You need to try it out. And this was before we were even into podcasts. It's how we start with RFN, I guess. So I am intrigued to some degree. It depends on the year, depends how everything works out, if I've got the time and energy to play this.
Yeah, for sure. It's probably one of those ones that I'll pick up later down the line when it goes down in price. But in any case, it's great that those fans are getting something more from that series. Because, I don't know, I think it didn't do well commercially, so I just assumed that it wouldn't be coming back. But hey. Next up, Pokken Tournament DX is getting some new fighters. They just keep going down the well of like, what's the weirdest Pokemon we could use? And Aegislash is the next one up. So you're fighting as a sentient sword this time.
Why not?
Which is, sure, that's fair enough. Still not super interested.
Did this game sell well, Pokken on Switch?
I don't know. I think it's probably done okay. The thing that's weird about Pokken Tournament is it seems like it should sell billions because it's a Pokemon fighting game. But for whatever reason, not only do I not feel like very attracted to it, but it's just a weird mishmash of 2D and 3D. Like you like switch between the two, and it's a little strange.
We tried the demo on Wii U, and it wasn't to either of our tastes. I think not that we're into fighting games at all, really. But there you go.
And there's it's okay. I think people are enjoying it on Switch nonetheless. But I don't believe even in the fighting game scene it's that big a deal. Then we have Kirby Star Allies, which I believe got a release date, which I don't actually have to hand right now, but I think it's coming out sometime in March, which makes sense. Like it seems like March 16th actually is what it says. So that game looks like a Kirby game, still continues to look like a Kirby. It seems that people are saying like he has the ability to do double copy abilities again, so it's kind of calling back to Kirby 64, which I know you played.
Yeah, I mean, that was fun at the time. That was a good Kirby game that I played, but this game just feels so uninspiring. And compared to the two 3DS games, that I mean, we've both missed both of those games, but I think both of us are agreed that those games do look interesting and we'd like to try them at some point. And this game, for me at least, just doesn't ooze anything that's vaguely new or interesting, or it feels like a very run-of-the-mill Kirby by numbers, perhaps.
Yeah, and you need those because they still sell well and people like them. But
Kirby is so consistent on Nintendo systems.
Yeah, for sure. Nothing if not consistent. We then have the game that will be released on a fridge in the near future because it's on every fucking thing else.
Why this game just die?
Is Hyrule Warriors back again on the Switch? Seems like the ultimate complete version with every DLC, everything from the 3DS and Wii U smushed together. The ultimate package if you want hundreds of hours of mindlessly killing bokoblins. It's all there for you. Next one's an interesting announcement is a new Mario Tennis game, which when it first came up, I'm like, oh god, are they just porting the Wii U one again? Because people did not like that Wii U game. It was pretty bad.
Game Explain did an analysis of this trailer, and the stadiums in the trailer featured are identical to the Wii U version. I'm
not surprised.
There's even artwork taken straight out of Mario Party 6 from the GameCube.
What?
Yes, on the one of the billboards inside the stadium.
Okay.
That's all this kind of strange deep dive Game Explained like to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of reused content in there. But like you said, with the extra story mode, this game could have a lot more going for it.
It's good that you said could have, because I think we're both a little wary when they say story mode. Now, they do bring up the Sacred Cow, which is Mario Power Tennis or whatever it's called on GBA. I can't remember the actual name. You played that one, right?
No, I didn't play the GBA one. I played the Game Boy Color one.
Okay, Game Boy Color
which
one.
Which was also RPG focused in that
Yes.
story mode, which was great.
So they bring that up as like, hey, we're bringing back the story mode, but they don't mention the word RPG anywhere. And from what it looks like, from what I can tell...
It's a list of levels.
It looks like an overworld map, a glorified menu that leads to missions and boss battles. It does not seem like a progression, and especially because you're playing as Mario, you're not playing as a, create a character type thing like you did back in the day. It does not seem... I think a lot of people are going to be tricked by this and get mad. I think a lot of people are going to buy this game and be like, where's my RPG mode? And like, they never promised that. They said it's a story mode. So be wary. Please be wary, because I don't want people to get disappointed when this thing comes out and is not what they thought it was going to be.
Let's just hope that if a Mario Golf comes to Switch, which I'm sure it will at some point, that they could maybe do something with that game.
Yeah, the problem I find is that it seems like they would have to put in so many more resources these days to make, a big, expansive 3D game with an RPG mode.
Yeah, it kind of suits itself more to that handheld style game, like a golf story.
That's why the indie games can come out and do what those games did in the past, because they have the scope and ability to do it on a 2D perspective, as opposed to, the big old AAA kind of, not AAA, but like, Nintendo have polish on their new games, and I don't think they have enough resources to put in the depth there, unfortunately.
Right.
So, in any case, I'm looking at it curiously from a distance. I may be interested. Next up, we have Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. The Ys series is one that I've heard lots of about the years, and on the Switch, it seems like the kind of RPG that I might be interested in, because it's one of those things that like I can passively play and grind and stuff like that. So maybe it's not super interesting to me, but I guess those fans will be happy. Then there's free DLC for Mario Odyssey. Luigi pops up, Bally, and for a hot second I'm thinking, oh, here we go, Galaxy again, playable through as Luigi. Not quite the case. What do you think of this balloon hiding and finding?
Was it giant Beast Cast? I think they were like joking that they'd split this into 2 modes: hide and seek, one for hide and one for seek, where you basically hide balloons and then you go out and seek them.
2 whole modes.
2 full modes, exactly.
Yeah,
it's a neat idea. I don't think it's fair to be overly critical on something that's free. So no. I mean, it'll be interesting, and I think it's a nice way of rewarding those players who have experienced the worlds a lot more in depth, say kingdoms, and if you've gone and got all the moons like we have, there's definitely a few nooks and crannies that I know that could be fun to play online with UMZ and hide them balloons. It
feels like the sort of thing where I'll come back to it for half an hour and try it and then never think about it again and put it down.
It'll be like, oh, that was a nice afternoon of online multiplayer and finding out, going back to those kingdoms. But I think there's still the paid DLC kingdom stuff to come potentially. This is definitely nowhere near that.
For sure. I think that it seems it's linked to your friends list, so you can go through and see what your friends have hidden and go after theirs. So it seems like it's easily locked to let you discover and find and do all that stuff. So that seems neat. Then we had a new fighting game from SNK, which is SNK Heroines, which is all these female fighters from old SNK games that there have been a ton of releasing on the eShop because of the Neo Geo Classics. So if you're into those, that's for you, not for me. Mario plus Rabbids getting the new character and new world, which is part of the DLC drop. It's Donkey Kong. It looks like he has a boomerang banana going on in the trailer, which is pretty rad. I really liked Mario plus Rabbids. I don't know if I'm going to go back for this DLC or not. Maybe when it comes down in price later down the line. But hey, that's cool that they're doing great support for this game and really meaningful stuff. It seems like they're putting a lot of love and care, as they did the original game, into the DLC. So I'm happy to see that. We have Payday 2 coming to Switch, which had already been announced, but it looks like there's a new character and some other stuff. not for me again. And then we had 2 indie games that got the spotlight, Fe and Celeste. Both look pretty curious. Have you got any interest in either of these, Bally?
There's still like a wealth of Switch indie games that I do need to go back to. Stuff like
and you're getting to them right now with Meat Boy. And
Meat Boy, VVVV, definitely. Those are a couple. Severed is another one.
Yes, for sure.
Axiom Verge, that's the game I'm trying to say. I need to go back to that. So like, there's still a lot on my plate in terms of like indie games I need to go back to. I'd be interested to see what you say on these games. MZ might try them after that.
Yeah, I think I'll probably pick up Celeste. I have reached out for review codes, so we'll see if that happens or not. But otherwise, I think it's one of those games that I've been curious enough in. It's my type of genre, so I'll take a look for sure at both of those games potentially. Then Bally,
my highlight of the direct,
a game that you won't shut up about, and now I'm pretty I'm your cheerleader behind the scenes, as it were, now for this game. It's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze with a funky mode. Funky Kong mode coming in.
Oh, the memes that went on with funky mode after this announcement,
I know,
which
it was
is
really
great.
good.
Like RFN did the whole like RFN now with new added funky mode.
Yep.
It's great. I think if anyone, one of the gripes that a few people have with Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is that it's too hard. So if you want to add funky mode, and Funky Kong sort of like he's got his surfboard, I think it is, and you can kind of glide, almost like hover a bit more on and have this crazy long jump. He's got really powered up swim moves where he can constantly speed boost underwater. So like he can't
be hurt by spikes.
Exactly. Either, he's a way of breezing through the game a bit more easily if that's your cup of tea, or if you want to kind of resort to him after trying the level on with DK, I guess.
It's a really smart thing in my opinion, because it takes the idea of like a lot of, so in Wolfenstein and Wolfenstein 2, when you click on easy mode, there's a picture of BJ Blazkowicz with a baby dummy in his mouth and like a bonnet on his head, as if to say like, you fucking baby for playing on this mode. And I think games can do that sometimes. It is kind of jokey in Wolfenstein, but also I think games can make the player feel bad for playing on easy. Whereas in this game, they're like, hey, this is the coolest character. Do you want to be the coolest character? He's so cool that he can't be hurt, you know? Like, It's a really smart proposition to make the person who feels like they want to play on an easier difficulty not feel bad for doing so. And that's just very clever from their perspective. Nintendo have always been good at like ushering people in. And frankly, Tropical Freeze, if you're not into platformers, is going to punish you very, very hardly. And a lot of people were turned off by it because of that. So I think that it's great that they have this in here. And he also serves a function as like a speed running character. Like he seems like the character that would be able to go through the game the fastest if you got great control over him. So that seems like it could be great for that community as well. It's just all round such a smart addition.
And like I'm definitely prepared to bite again on this game. I'm actually going to try and get a hard copy because Caroline's thinking about getting a Switch in the next few months. So if I get a hard copy, she could maybe like borrow it after me and that sort of thing. So I'm intrigued by this. It's so great that more people are going to be able to play this game. And like Nintendo even said during the direct, I think they said like the critically acclaimed like Donkey Kong Country. I was like, oh, that's a nice phrase to say.
It's so funny, like the turnaround of this, because you go into the E3 threads for Nintendo when this was revealed, and people were so mad because Retro were not making Metroid; they were working on another Donkey Kong. People were incredibly angry, and in the years since, like it's been this turnaround completely, where this is now reviewed and looked back on as such a cult hit, such a like it will be remembered as one of the best platformers ever made. There's such a different perspective coming to it this time, and you look at the reactions now to this coming to Switch, and people are overjoyed. They're like, oh my god, this is one of the best games ever, so many more people are going to get to experience it. It's so funny how like time and place can change the perspective on a game.
It's great. And it fits one of my predictions nicely from the other episode, so we'll see.
Very good. The final announcement was kind of revealed a bit early, leaked a bit early, and also ties into the burning Chibi Robo, which is in the pose of one of the characters from this game. That is Dark Souls Remastered is heading to the Nintendo Switch.
And it's coming to Switch alongside all the other systems, right?
It is, yes. I don't think this meets your prediction because it's a remastered game, Bally. That's the thing that I would hold against it is, that when a brand new game comes out at the same time on all of these systems, then
Fair enough.
Then you may get the point. But
Fair enough.
Remastered ones do not count for me. But it's still amazing that this is happening because it means that a lot of Nintendo fans will get to experience a game which I think a lot of people cite as similar to classic Zelda games, like the original Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2 and all this stuff. Dark Souls kind of carries on in a much darker, grittier world with incredibly punishing difficulty and also a lengthy, satisfying learning curve. And it's been one of those games and one of those series that I've steered clear of because it has a very horror, dark aesthetic, and I just don't like being in those worlds. I've talked a lot in the past of how I feel comfortable in some worlds and very uncomfortable in others, and how that changes what I like to play and what not.
You're going to play Metroid Prime at some point. Come on, it's just going to happen.
When it comes to the Switch portably. And here's the thing, this is why I actually consider playing Dark Souls now, is there is something about a smaller portable console that is less immersive and as such is a much better proposition for me, right? Because if you have this big TV screen and you're like, that's the main focus and it's all on there, it's intimidating and large and scary, it does something to my brain where I don't feel comfortable. But if it's in a portable handheld where I'm the one in control, I have this tiny screen in front of me, I know what's going on, I can not have it like super plugged in and me not be like, I know people like being immersed in the world of Souls, but for me that's the thing that kind of makes me steer clear of it. If I have that detachment from it, playing it portably, I feel like I can actually get into these games and like feel like I'm enjoying them. So that may be the way I play this, despite the fact that it's an inferior version in every way. It'll look worse, it'll run poorly, not poorly, but like it'll be 30 as opposed to 60, which for me, doesn't make sense. But like there are some things like these elements of horror and scariness that will mean I would rather take the inferior version because of the portability. So yeah, I don't know how you feel about eventually trying this game as well, Bally.
Again, it depends on what else comes out this year and where I have sort of gaps and lulls and what I plan on playing and mixing it up with trying to fit in backlog games and trying to beat that. So I would be interested in this game. It is a genre that I've really not tried at all. It'd be good for me to try a game like Dark Souls. And certainly with this remastered edition on Switch, like it's a great opportunity. As you said, I'm in love with the idea of the Switch and like playing handheld and on a home console. It's a great concept, and it just makes games like Dark Souls far more appealing. I agree with you in my mind to play and pick up. Yeah.
So that was pretty much it. Some interesting things there. Overall, Bally, how do you feel about this mini direct? Did it give you anything to hang on to, or was it just like, yeah, that's cool?
Pretty good. I think it's highly likely there'll be another direct before E3, and I think ultimately Nintendo may be saving the big stuff for E3. I think people need to calm down about the Metroids and the Animal Crossings, perhaps the Pokemons. That like if they're coming at E3. It's not going to happen now. And for a direct mini, ports are solid. Like I think a game like Tropical Freeze is very good. Dark Souls is great, and the new stuff like Mario Tennis, although we're feeling a bit funny about that story mode, like that's an interesting new game. So like it was overall, like I'd maybe give it like a 6 out of 10, a 5 out of 10. Like decent, it's good, it's fine. It's what I'd expect at this time of year from a direct mini.
Yeah, it's a lot of people are going to be mad because they hyped it up too much for themselves, but with expectations tempered, I think it was all round pretty good.
There's probably a lot of people who own a Switch who didn't own a Wii U, and this is their first time getting back into the swing of things with stuff like Nintendo Directs, and maybe their expectations of what a Direct is and what mini Directs can provide are maybe a bit warped compared to the hardened Wii U owners like ourselves.
Right, like we're just set up for disappointment most times.
Most of the time, yeah.
When we get anything, it's just a bone. Yeah, so there you go. That's the mini direct. But that is not where Nintendo stopped with their news train, because it continued onwards ever forward into the hype of eternity. We got a new announcement that was preempted this time. They did make a little heads up, and they're like,
hey, 12-hour notice.
Something like that, like less than a day. They're like, hey, we're going to show something. It's for kids and for kids at heart. So they already prepped people to be like, let's not overhype ourselves. Like, this is probably not a thing for us Nintendo fans of like all the main stuff. And they announced a thing called Nintendo Labo, which is... how do you even fucking explain Nintendo Labo? It's cardboard creations that utilize the Switch in games where these cardboard creations are a part of them. So like a mini cardboard piano where you are playing the piano and it detects you hitting the note and there will be stuff on the screen of the Switch which slots into it. Or a fishing rod where you are trying to fish with the cardboard fishing rod.
And there's also instructions on the Switch that help you build these creations. So it's I mean, my expectations when the announcement, like the 12-hour warning announcement was made out, were very, very low. I think your guess was some random peripheral, and I think you were pretty on the nose there, MZ, to be honest. I was guessing it could be an amiibo, it could be like an update to the parental app or something as boring. I don't know. I was just prepared for something incredibly boring.
Right.
And this was anything but boring. It's
insane. Like I was telling you earlier, but when I first was watching the trailer, I'm like, okay, like this is artsy and weird, but they're not going to sell this, right? This seems way too fucking complicated. Like as soon as the fishing pole got pulled out, I'm like, the fuck? How does that even work?
How does a kid make
what? Like it looks like an art project as opposed to something practical that like you can actually buy and make yourself. And yet all these crazy contraptions, the robot most of all, are actually real and they're selling them and you can make them. I was gobsmacked at that fact, honestly. That's the thing that blew me away.
Right, they're more than just decoration, they're actually functional and operate. And I thought that when you just watch the trailer through one time, you're like, oh, that's fun. You dress up as a robot and you play this robot game. It's like, no. It's more than just dressing up as a robot. Like, there are 5 inputs going into the Switch. 1 from your head and 4 going into one Joy-Con on your back. And the actual way that you essentially have strings connecting your arms and strings connecting your legs. Those strings pull levers that are inside your backpack.
And they have like these white spots on them, which the IR sensor can detect.
Exactly. So it's then there's an IR sensor in the red Joy-Con on your pack, reading the movements of these 4 strings, and that is just insane. Like that technology,
it's engineering like craziness. It's fucking insanity.
It's really, really impressive and fascinating. The same with the piano. It's an IR sensor reading spots on each of the keys and dialing that back into the Switch and playing a note. Like that's just insane. And I think that what I think is really cool, because I was a huge Lego fan growing up, absolutely huge, and the biggest downside of Lego I always felt was that I really, really enjoyed the building, getting the instructions out, getting a massive box, pouring all the bits on the floor, spending hours just building these crazy buildings and vehicles and other things. But then I wouldn't really play with the Lego much once it was built. I might envisage it's like a few scenarios and have some fun there, but the process of building was so much more fun than the process of playing with. And I feel like Labo gets around that in a big way, where you're not just building, you're also actually playing a game on your Switch using the creations you're making. And I think that's a huge appeal for a lot of people in that sort of Lego mold who enjoy building but not necessarily always enjoy the playing of Lego.
Right, so like the fun is in the building, but also there is fun at the end of the rainbow too.
There's equal amounts of fun at both ends, not weighted purely towards the creation. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll see. I don't know that I could like say that in full confidence that there will be an equal amount of fun at the end of the rainbow, because we don't actually know how deep these games go. So there are 2 packs they're selling. There's the variety pack, which has 5 different cardboard contraptions, and then there's the robot, which is like the one robot machine with the backpack,
which is actually more than the multi-kit.
It costs more, which honestly I think that makes sense, because that thing looked complicated as fuck. Like, it did, absolutely insane. So it's like $70, $80 for the each one, and then 60 quid, 70 quid I think in the UK. it's a lot of money. A lot of people, obviously, on Twitter being snarky, oh, 70 quid for cardboard, yeah, fucking... Which, I get that, and I also kind of agree with it. It's like, it's kind of a high price. Like, I would like it to be closer to the £40. Like, if it was 40 quid, it's the sort of thing that I would impulse buy. I would get it because it looks interesting and cool.
Yeah, it's like the same price as another game, or it's slightly cheaper, and you're getting
at 70 quid. It's much harder for me to go, okay, I'm in, because I don't know. I just don't know at the end. Like, I'll have fun creating it, I'll maybe enjoy the game, but I don't know what the depth is there.
But part of you is intrigued, isn't it? That's the thing. Like, part of you is like,
Yeah, there is. Because it is this quirky, weird Nintendo that, quite honestly, in a lot of aspects of Switch, we've been missing. And to their benefit, probably, because, I was talking on Twitter a little bit earlier about, people wanting personality back in Nintendo's OSs and their menus, and I was like, yes, I strongly agree with this, but also, if they did that, they'd lose the speed and versatility and all of that slickness that came with the Switch. So it's nice to see them being strange again, and although the price for me is a little bit absurd, I actually think they are making a smart play and pricing themselves into the Toys R Us. Well, isn't Toys R Us dead? I guess Toys R Us went under.
The online toy market.
The online toy market, the retail toy market, as much as it still exists, alongside the Lego. Because, Lego is a fucking expensive hobby.
Yeah.
Like, it is so absurdly expensive to buy that Millennium Falcon Star Wars thing. It's just ridiculous when you look at it and you go into those shops, like, holy shit, my parents spent this much on all this fucking Lego. Like, it's, when you step back, you're like, Jesus, that's a lot of money. And so they're probably trying to be on that shelf, like, right next to it, trying to compete, which makes sense to hike the price up to that much. So yeah,
I'm intrigued.
It is definitely a wait and see for me. It is like, what are impressions? So far, I read a few pieces, like from The Verge and The Guardian and all these places, and people are very impressed by how clever it is, how easy it is to set up, and how the technology just works. And calling it technology is even weird, because it's pieces of cardboard, for God's sake. But
yeah.
When people are mentioning that the keys on the piano have little strips on the back of them that when they ping up will go into line with the IR sensor and know which note is being played, and then that will seamlessly transition onto the Switch screen and play the note in real time at the same time, it's kind of mind-blowing what they've done here. It is incredibly ingenious and smart.
It's a wireless keyboard made out of cardboard. It's like,
right. Like,
how did
what?
they do that?
It's fucking crazy. Like, I'm so blown away by the ingenuity of it. My question is, like, aside from that kids market, can they expand on this? I think Reggie in an interview was saying, like, look, we have the ability to go out there and make things that are more tailored towards our core audience, our more mature audience, and I would be interested to see what they do down the line there. But what a weird thing.
I am completely on board with the idea in principle. That I initially sided a lot more with wanting to pick up the multi-pack with all the different contraptions. I thought it felt like it was better value, but then when you actually think about it, there's not a whole lot of game in there. There might be something that we know of.
As we said, like, we don't actually know how deep it goes, like if the piano has a bunch of mini games or if it's just a piano,
right?
Like, I don't know what the software in terms of its depth is like.
Yeah, and likewise, we don't know the depth of the game with the robot and what that could entail. But when I started thinking about it, I thought the robot looks a lot more fun, actually, when you think about it. And then I've been thinking a lot more about, what if my arms are too long for the strings on this robot, this contraption? Like, I was like, I'll be so bummed if I'm just too big for this thing. And then I thought, oh, come on, they'll probably have 2 sets of strings, or at least the strings will be long enough for adults.
It looks like you can, like, wrap the strings around on the feet anyway, like that contraption. Looked like he was wrapping a lot of string around it to make it the right length.
So I'm definitely siding with the robot more. I I would like to see more of that game and to know that it is more of a game. And I'd love to see some reviews.
And I do wonder if it is actually more fully featured, because a lot of people pointing out that this looks like what has risen from the ashes of Project Giant Robot, which Miyamoto was showing off at E3.
It absolutely is. The actual design of the robot, I don't know if you've seen screen comparisons, is identical. It literally is. It literally, the design of the robot. And what's fascinating is those 4 strings we were talking about that link on the back with the 4 slots, those were shown on the Wii U version that Miyamoto was playing. So they managed to fit their contraption into the existing framework of what that robot looked like, which is bizarre, and makes you wonder how long this has been in the pipeline, maybe, or if they managed to just fit it retroactively. So yeah, I'm fascinated to see what people think of that, of how that works. And like, I'd be fascinated if imagine if the robot works really well and lots of people buy it, and then they bring out other games that work with that robot suit. Like, who knows where this could go next.
They also have the ability to leverage their own IP. Like, I've been hearing people talk about, what if you had Luigi's Vacuum from Luigi's Mansion, and they had a Luigi's Mansion game where you used it, like something like that.
Exactly. And I think we have just seen the tip of the iceberg of some of the ideas they've got lined up for this stuff. Like, they wouldn't...
I mean, even in the trailer, there's a bunch of weird shit, like that bird and the shotgun and the camera. Like, there's a lot of stuff they show in the trailer that just isn't available to buy in either of these packs.
And they've officially removed the Wii U tab on the Nintendo website for Labo.
RIP Wii U.
Right, exactly. RIP Wii U. So if it's replaced the tab of its former home console on the website, it must have more than a few months worth of releases. Like, this is something that could go on for quite some time. And obviously that depends on the success of this thing. And my hunch is that this is going to sell really well. I think the price point is a tricky point, and the durability of the cardboard is also an important issue. Although some of the review sort of people who have experienced it have had hands-on with it have said the quality of the cardboard is actually very good, even though it is still cardboard.
Right. It looks thick. It looks like a solid piece of cardboard, even if it is cardboard. The worry is, like, kids with drinks, or kids who stomp around that will fall over or stomp around. Like, there's definite possibility for this to crumple and break and be destroyed.
I was just playing the robot game, and I just sat down on the back of a couch and smushed my jetpack.
Right,
like, it is concerning. And that's something where, like, I don't have kids, and this would just be for me to use, so I know that I would be able to look after it better than perhaps a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I admit, if there was a 5-year-old at my house, I'd feel very uneasy about them using my Labo.
I mean, you would want to be there the whole time while it was, play with them, make sure they're not on their own when they're doing it. So yeah, as opposed to video games, which parents often use to, like, let their kids just sit there and they don't have to deal with them, this seems like a much more hands-on affair. Like, you have to, if you don't want it being broken or whatever,
don't leave my sight.
And another concern that was brought up a lot in our Discord is, what about the Switch itself? This is a $300 piece of technology that is kind of fragile. Like, it doesn't have a glass screen, but it is, like, breakable if it falls. It's a worry for sure. And I think, actually, when I looked at all the games on offer, it didn't really seem like there was any of them where you'd be in a position where you're lifting the screen off the ground and potentially dropping it, because, like, the house is on the ground.
They're sort of the motorbike controls, but they're not up in the air. They're like in front of you on a table or something. So, like, you're right. There's nothing. A lot of people thought that the robot, like the Switch, was like VR attached to your face. It's like, no, that would be a horrible idea. And if Nintendo do VR at some point, it's not going to be like that. So I think that the Joy-Cons are getting chucked all over the shop. I don't think but we know that they're sort of $80.
They are the key piece of technology, though, in the Switch. Honestly, when it comes to weirdness and strange things, they've just packed those Joy-Cons with so many unique possibilities that they're able to leverage this IR sensor and do something meaningful with it, and have the motion be at such a high fidelity that it can track your head motion in the robot game. it's smart that they've thought about that. And we also were talking about how like the robot in the kit looks like the Xenoblade one because it goes into a skell almost when it's racing around.
You see it transform into a car very briefly.
It feels like this weird amalgamation between Project Giant Robot and Xenoblade Chronicles X, like the two kind of robot things Nintendo have done in the past years.
I am fascinated by that game. I am very interested. I think that overall, if you already own a Switch, this looks like a lot of fun, even though it is a lot of money. I think that the idea of, from maybe a family who don't own a Switch or anything, going into this idea and knowing that you have to buy a Switch and Labo with it, that is now very steep. You're talking $400-$500. So, that is an awful lot of money, but I think...
I do think they're going to bundle them together eventually. That's the thing that I feel is going to be the Christmas hot item, is a Nintendo Switch Labo bundle for $300. Like, they're going to get the price down while including a Labo in it to shift a lot of units.
And do you think Labo will be hot? Do you think this is gonna sell well?
I mean, the buzz we've seen so far, like, it seems like if you have kids, you're incredibly excited for this. You know, all the video game Twitter parents that I've seen have been just off the moon for it. And again, like, it's for them. That's the target audience. That's who they are shooting for right now, is the Switch owning parent who has a kid. And that audience is growing. Like, it's not enormous, but it is getting bigger. And this can also reach out to a bunch of other audiences. Like, there are going to be hardcore enough Switch fans who just want it because it's a Switch thing. There are going to be kids who ask their parents for it because they see the advertisement on Disney and want it. It's definitely going to have a ripple effect like the Switch itself did. I think it's going to be successful, and you are going to hear stories about kids being idiots and breaking it and having issues and the Switch is breaking. But those will always happen no matter what the technology is. Like the Wii with the same thing with the Wii Remote. You fucking threw a Wii Remote at a window, Bally. Like, we have first-hand experience. So, you know, that's just going to be a thing no matter what you do. And I am very curious to see how this thing sells. My only issue is price, and I think if they had put this as a $40 to $50 thing as opposed to a $70, $80 thing, it would be doing gangbusters. That's the one like barrier to entry more than anything, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating year, and I'm intrigued when this comes out, April 20th, which is like some big weed smoking day or something in the US, right?
420.
Yeah, 420. So
yeah, it's I don't know if you.
I don't know anything about 420.
Basically, Bally, the time when people get home from school and that's when they fire up their weed is at 20 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, because, you know, you leave school around whenever and you get home 20 minutes later, so 4:20 is when people smoke weed, so that's why.
I got you.
It's an internet thing. It's been taken out of proportion because it's the internet and memes and all that stuff. But anyway, enough about that. I'm pretty sure that we've covered anything else you want to say about Labo before we close out here, Bally?
Just that it's so refreshing for Nintendo to be creative and have the confidence to be so creative. And I wish them like the best of luck with it, because it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how this thing does. Honestly, the thing I'm most interested in is the Giant Bomb Quick Look for Labo.
Oh my god, I'm so pumped.
That's
so
the thing
pumped.
I want to see.
I just want to see Jeff Gershman walking around in that robot outfit.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Our dreams will be fulfilled. So yes, that's going to be it. That's going to be the show for today. Thanks everyone for listening, for tuning in. We have a lot of things going on right now. Of course, we need to thank our TNL ambassadors, our Patreon supporters. So Bally.
Our two TNL ambassadors are Atari Alex and of course my girlfriend Caroline. Thank you so much for your support. That is of course a $10 tier on Patreon.
Absolutely. You go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can get bonus episodes. We have a Star Wars episode up about our history with Star Wars. We have our TNL Ranks first episode, and the second episode will be going up in February. So whenever you sign up for Patreon, if you do the $2 or $5 tier, you will get access to the backlog of old episodes. If you want all the bonus episodes, then they're there for your perusal. So if you would like to support us, that is the best way to do so. You can find us also on our Discord, where we're having a lot of conversations, fun chats over there. It's been popping off, some good stuff. And there's lots of discussion that can be had about our next Backlog Club game, which we're getting deeper into. Me and Bally are playing a lot of Final Fantasy VI. And yeah, that's going to be happening soon. We don't have a date right now.
Probably give a date next episode, let's say. I think we can probably do that.
Yeah, you're pretty deep in. I'm getting close to getting more deep in, and
you're not that far away from me. You're not that far. I've just played way too much.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to enjoy discussing Final Fantasy VI, but you can discuss that on our Discord, and it's been a fun time doing that over there. You can find our Discord by going to Twitter. Where can you find our Twitter account, Bally?
Follow our Twitter at TNL Podcast. That's at TNL Podcast. It's the best place to go to jump into our Discord server. It's got links to our YouTube channel. It's got our email address, which of course is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. And it's also the best place to go to find out when all the latest episodes and everything of that sort comes out.
Absolutely. Where can people find you on Twitter, Bally?
Please find me at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. I don't think that the next few weeks might be as hype driven as that sort of direct mini was, perhaps, but you never know. There might be another February direct and stuff to come. Maybe. You
can find me at Lord NBZ on the Twitter, and you can find the show in various places. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on every place good podcatchers are sold. I keep doing that. There's something about like those sentences, the way it rolls out of my tongue. So you can find us like on Pocket Casts and all that nonsense. We're anywhere that you can download podcasts for the most part, apart from Spotify. Spotify are dicks, and Google Play is still not in our country apparently. So yeah, just go there, do that. Review us on iTunes. It's been a while since we had a review on iTunes. Those are really helpful. So if you'd like to review us, that would be most appreciated. Really helps us out. And yeah, I think that pretty much closes out for this episode, Bally. Anything else that we need to say before we get on out of here?
Labo.
What?
I just find the word Labo so funny.
Oh, Labo, okay.
Yeah, it was just
Labo, I don't know.
Labo.
I think people have been having trouble saying it or what it even means. But yes, a merry Labo to you and all yours. And we will see you in a couple of weeks' time with another episode of This Nintendo Life. Goodbye, everyone. The musical interludes used on today's episode were Pushing Onwards from VVVVVV, copyright Terry Kavanagh 2010, and Forest Funk from Super Meat Boy, copyright Team Meat 2010.
So Caroline sort of knew that we used to be called Now You're Playing With Power, but she got it kind of confused in her head. And like she knew it was a marketing thing from like the 80s with Nintendo and all that. It was 90s? It's 90s.
Like, whenever it was.
So for some reason, she thought it was actually Now You're Cooking With Gas.
What? That makes literally no sense. Okay.
So, for some reason, she thought this whole time that Nintendo's like slogan's the word I'm looking for, was Now You're Cooking With Gas. I was like, it's not Now You're Cooking With Gas. Like, it might have
good, though.
Now You're Playing With Power might be a play on words on Now You're Cooking With Gas.
Probably. That's so good, though. Oh my god, I wish it was that. I wish our podcast was called Now You're Cooking With Gas. We should start up a side podcast and call it that instead. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
That's really good.